Good morning. Thanks, Jake. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming on July 5th. I know that there's probably lots of sleeping in that wanted to happen, lots of stayed up too late, but I appreciate you coming. And actually, a little bit of a lighter crowd. That's probably okay for me on my first time. So I appreciate that. But for those, again, I just want to add my welcome to everybody that has done it already. If you're looking or if you're viewing online, happy to have you. If you're here, extra points. All right, so let me introduce myself a little bit. So I've been up on stage before doing the greeting and doing the welcome, but never in this capacity. So I just want to take just a quick couple seconds here to introduce myself. So like Jake had mentioned, my name is Nick, and I serve on the HCC Council, which we'll get into this a little bit later, but why that's important. I'm on the council, I'm not on the staff, and I'll get back to that later in the talk and why that's important. But I'm married to Nicole, who said she was going to pace in the back because she's really nervous. So I'm married to Nicole. We've been married for almost 19 years. We have 2 kids. Jake just turned 15, and in the fall, he's going to walk into this building as a freshman in high school, the same building that my wife and I walked into 25 years ago, which is a little bit of a trip to have Jake walk in here as a freshman in high school. Super excited about that. And then I have Emery, who is 12, who I'm pretty sure is 12 going on 22. So if there's any girl dads out there in the crowd, I think you know what I'm talking about. So she's going to rule the world one day. I just hope that she doesn't burn the house down before she gets there. But as far as HCC, my roots run pretty deep here. I started going to HCC in middle school, and so that was about 29-ish years ago. We were meeting at Goodman Middle School. I started going to HCC. And then, like I said, I have the privilege today literally today, speaking in front of you, but also to serve on the HCC Council. And I'm super excited about the things that the church is doing and the places we're going to go. So, appreciate that. My day job, I work for the Gig Harbor Fire Department. I've been doing that for almost 21 years. And it's to be able to work, thank you. Thank you. It's an honor, though. It's truly an honor. I get to give back to the community that helped raise me, which I think is really, really, really awesome and impactful. So, been there since 2006, like I said, almost 21 years. So that's a little bit about me. And like I said when I first got up here, you guys, I am nervous. I would 1,000% literally rather run into a burning building. I know that people say that like metaphorically, but I'm like literally serious. I would be more comfortable running into a burning building right now that's completely dark and hot and I can't see anything. But you know what? That's not how God works. God asks you to step out of your comfort zone, and so that's what I'm doing today. But I am grateful that Jake and Karen gave me the opportunity to talk. And again, soft landing on July 5th, and we're going to do a little bit of a shorter version. So if this is really, really rough, it'll be over quick. It's not going to be like this long drawn out talk. But before we jump into Acts chapter 5, we've been in the series on Acts, but before we jump into Acts chapter 5, which is what we're going to talk about today, I just want to give a little bit of context on the verses that immediately precede what we're going to talk about today out of Acts chapter 4. And so in the end of Acts chapter 4, there's a story about a guy named Barnabas. Jake briefly mentioned his name last week. But what I want to mention today is that there's this little snippet, and Barnabas had a piece of property, and Barnabas sold that piece of property, and he gave 100% of the proceeds back to the church. Super important. Just remember the 100% of the proceeds back to the church. The second thing he did, or that's really important, is that his desire to give back to the church was not out of any selfish ambition. It was just out of devotion and commitment to the church. That's it. Okay, I know that's a really brief context, but I think it's important as we get into Acts chapter 5. All right, so Acts chapter 5, I think we have a slide that we're going to go through, but I'm going to read Acts chapter 5, and I'm going to read the passage in one chunk, and then we're going to talk about a couple things as we go. All right, starting in verse number 1. But there was a certain man named Ananias who with his wife Sapphira sold some property. He brought part of the money to the apostles, claiming it was the full amount. With his wife's consent, he kept the rest. Then Peter said, Ananias, why have you let Satan fill your heart? You lied to the Holy Spirit, and you kept some of the money for yourself. The property was yours to sell or not to sell, as you wished. And after selling it, the money was also yours to give away. How could you do something like this? You weren't lying to us, but to God." As soon as Ananias heard these words, he fell to the floor and died. Everyone who had heard about it was terrified. Then some young men got up, wrapped him in a sheet, and took him out and buried him. About 3 hours later, his wife Sapphira came in, not knowing what had happened. No Twitter back in the day, so it wasn't like somebody was tweeting from the audience. His wife Sapphira, not knowing what happened, Peter had asked her, "Was this the price you and your husband received for your land?" "Yes," she replied, "that was the price." And Peter said, how could the two of you even think of conspiring to test the Spirit of the Lord like this? The young man who buried your husband are just outside the door, and they will carry you out too." Instantly, she fell to the floor and died. When the young man came in and saw that she was dead, they carried her out and buried her beside her husband. Great fear gripped the entire church and everyone else who had heard what had happened. All right, so there's the 11 verses we're going to spend some time on. There's a lot to unpack. Again, we're gonna jam through this in pretty short order. So let's get right into the points we're going to talk about. I want to talk about three things today. First, God established his church on integrity, not on pretense. The second thing is that God values your motivation, or our motivation, not our money. And then the third thing is God desires an authentic heart, not a manufactured image. All right, let's talk about point number one. So I read the passage the first time, and I was like, geez, that was awfully severe and awfully quick. Like, we went from, I made a mistake, to dead on the floor, and finished. And I was like, man, that was awfully, awfully quick. And I honestly struggled a little bit in the first time I read it to man, where's the grace? Where's the grace in that? I felt like, man, the God that I've come to know since giving my life to Christ 29 years ago, grace-filled, insanely forgiving, and I was like, man, where's the grace in the passage that I read? And then I read it a couple more times, and there were some things that I picked up on that I wanted to share with you. And one of those is I actually think there was some grace in the passage. I think if you read a little bit deeper, there was grace, there was some opportunity, and there was maybe some maybe Ananias and Sapphira missed some messages in there. So, first, Ananias and Sapphira did have a chance, or Ananias did have a chance to recognize his deception and change course, and I actually think that he kind of recognized it at first and then doubled down and chose to maybe I can fake everybody out. So the passage says that Ananias, he ran the plan by his wife. And I know maybe nobody else does this, but if you're like me, if I'm I'm going to go this way, I'm not sure that's the best way to go. Hey, Nicole, what do you think about this? And I'm kind of looking for a little bit like Nick. I think that's a bad plan. So he did that. He ran it by his wife, which seemed to indicate to me that he wasn't fully convinced it was the right thing to do. Had he recognized his misstep up front, I think the story probably would have been a little bit different. It might not have even been in that 11 verses. But he looked to his wife for approval first, which I think is the first clue that he wasn't fully committed. And I think that in a way could have been God working in his life a little bit indirectly, hey, I think this is a bad idea, don't do it. But he doubled down and he did it anyway. Now, Sapphira, she definitely had a chance to acknowledge her mistake, even after it happened, right? Because Peter questioned her about the offering and said, "Is this the full price you gave?" And she said, "Yep, sure is." And Peter's like, "Oh, okay, all right." And then we all saw how the story ended. So I actually do think that there was some grace in that moment, and I think they just missed it. Anybody in here have kids in the room, or had even little or grown? Any have kids? Okay. So maybe we're probably not the only one that did this with our kids, and I know my parents did it with me. My parents are in the front row here today. So they did it with me, but we had this conversation with our kids, and I'll use my kids as kind of the word picture, the example. But we had this conversation with my kids very early about making mistakes and lying about it. And so we had this conversation where it was like, all right, Jake and Emery, we're all going to make mistakes, your mom and I included, and all we want you to do is be honest. If you make a mistake, just own it. Just be honest, right? the lie is always going to make it worse, right? And so I thought about that example when I was reading through the passage, and I think that was kind of what Peter and God was like with Ananias and Sapphira. Were like, hey, like, I'm giving you an opportunity, come clean, be honest, and they didn't do it. But they doubled down on the lie, which, like we've told Jake and Emery, like it's always going to make it worse. Not occasionally, but like 100% of the time, it will always make it worse. We just want you to be honest. I think they had the chance to do that in the story, and they didn't. Secondly, I think that the consequence was severe because God was laying a foundation for the church. Remember that the book of Acts is this illustration of the first 30 years of God's new church. And I think God, through Peter, was laying some foundation. And one of the things that they were laying as a pillar, like a cornerstone or a pillar of that foundation, is integrity. Okay? Because with integrity, then comes trust. And with trust, then comes commitment. And then with commitment becomes a movement, right? A group of people in a movement. And without integrity and trust, no movement, no group of people, no buy-in. You're not able to communicate and bring people into into the church. And so I think God was establishing from the very get-go that hey, this is super important. We have to live with integrity. We have to have this above all else. It's almost like this, you can't get in the door without having integrity. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't make mistakes, right? We saw Ananias and Sapphira, they made mistakes, and I think that they were given an opportunity for grace. But I think that the consequence was so severe because integrity was so important. All right, I'm going to tell a little story. So I mentioned that I work for the fire department. Integrity is also one of our core values at the Gig Harbor Fire Department. It's on our website. It's on our walls. It's in our hiring information. It comes up in every interview, whether you're interviewing to become a firefighter for the first time, you're interviewing to work on our information technology department, you want to promote, we hit integrity over and over and over and over again. But that's super intentional. The reason that we hit it is because the public has to trust us. They have to trust us. We tell our folks that what other profession, and there's a couple, and I think being a pastor and leading a church is one of them, but what other profession, in addition to a very small number, do you get invited into someone's home that you have never met, right? So you guys somebody calls 911, they invite us into their home. We've probably never met you, and you invite us in, and then you hand us your most prized possession, your family, okay? It's because there's integrity. It's because you trust us. The community has come to trust us, and we have to continue to perpetuate that trust. We tell people at work that our main mission is to protect the community in their time of need, and they have to trust us. We tell people that when the community has no one else to call, they call us. You guys know the number. What's the number you call? Okay, you call 911. There is no 912. It doesn't exist. There's lots of other numbers, but there is no 912. And the reason that there's no 912 is because in the public safety arena, in the fire department at Gig Harbor, they don't need a 912. They can trust us, and we will do everything that we can to make their day just a little bit better. And so, but in order for us to do that effectively, like I said, you have to trust us, and it's taken generations. In our fire department, we've been a fire department since 1945. It's taken generations of trust that's been developed over years and then continued on. Same thing in the church, right? We have to live with integrity. That's why I think it was so severe for Ananias and Sapphira. And how I know that this applies today, some of you raised your hand that you have kids. Some of you brought your kids here today, and you dropped them off in Sunday school. And you probably dropped them off in Sunday school, for some of you, to teachers that you don't really know. You've never met, or maybe you've met casually. Why in the world would you do that? Well, because you trust us. Because you know that integrity is important to HCC. You know that integrity is important to the church. Why? Because for the last 2,000 years, starting in Acts, it was a foundational pillar of what we believed in. All right, quick story. When I was younger in my career, I was working on one of our ambulances. We call them medic units. And we got dispatched to the home of a young child who was having a first-time seizure. And the child was maybe 2. maybe 2. Just to like calm anybody's anxiety, the story's got a happy ending. All right, I want to bury the lead in the story. The story's got a happy ending. But when we arrived, we weren't super sure it was going to have that kind of ending. So I'm in the driver's seat. I came out of the driver's seat, came around the ambulance to the passenger side, and normally people wait for us inside the house. If you've ever called 911 and had us there, you might have waited inside the house for us to get there. The mom comes out, and she's screaming, okay? Think like it's exactly how you would picture it, right? She's screaming that she needs our help. She's running towards us, and with her baby in her arms, the baby she's 2, so the infant, not breathing, blue, and like limp, like ragdoll. And she takes her baby. I didn't have kids at the time, and so she takes her baby and doesn't waste any time. She doesn't tell me her name, tell me her story, ask for my resume, ask how long I've been a firefighter, am I able to help your child? None of that. None of that happened. She runs out, and she just literally like drops the baby into my arms. No questions asked. Just gave the baby to me. I took the baby, went into the back of the medic unit, left mom standing right next to the ambulance. We went to work, and like I said, the baby started doing much better. We ended up transporting the baby to the hospital, and as far as I know, the 2-year-old is now probably 22 and doing great. But it didn't look great. It didn't look great right away. So after the call, though, I started asking myself, like, why in the world would this mom just hand me this child? And it's because she trusted us, right? There was no 912, and she trusted us. We have an organization at the fire department and HCC and the church in the book of Acts that lives with integrity. And so I think when the modern church was formed, Peter established that integrity and honesty would be pillars of the church, and without them, the movement would fail. They were non-negotiable. And so I think that's a piece of why that consequence was so severe. All right, point number 2. Again, I said I'd circle back to this. Quick disclaimer. I am on the council, but I'm not on the staff. I am on the council, but I'm not on church staff. And I think why that is super important is I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about generosity in giving and in tithing. It's just going to be real brief, but I think it's important that I communicate that my desire to stand up here and talk to you about generosity in tithing and in giving, I have no conflict of interest, right? It's not my paycheck that this comes from, right? My motivation to ask us to be radical in our generosity with either our finances and our time or our skills is because of the impact that it has on others, not the impact that it has for me, okay? I just think that's super important in this context. Now, when I was reading the story of Ananias and Sapphira for the first couple times, it felt like it was a lot about the actual money. But after I read it a little bit more, I don't think that it's about the amount of money. I think it's about the condition of the heart. I think that that's what God is wanting us to get out of there. Money is simply the vehicle that God uses to communicate the message. Anybody seen Jerry Maguire? Okay, so there's a scene in Jerry Maguire where Rod Tidwell, who is a wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals, he is talking to his sports agent. Cuba Gooding Jr. plays Rod Tidwell. He's talking to his sports agent on the phone, Jerry Maguire, played by Tom Cruise. And there's this super famous line in the movie. Does anybody remember what the line in that? See, Jake, they've seen that movie. You need to come up with better examples of movies because they've seen that movie. All right, so you got it. So show me the money, right? And he's super animated, and he's trying to get Jerry Maguire to say it, and he says it over the phone, and he's screaming, show me the money. All right, while that is funny, it's not part of Ananias and Sapphira. But the reason I brought it up is because can you imagine God standing up here on stage and saying that to like a crowd? Like, show me the money. Like, no, you can't imagine him doing that. And why can't you imagine him doing that? Because he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. It's because that it's not about the money. It's about the motivation in your heart for the generosity. Now, don't misinterpret what I'm saying here, or what my boss would tell me is don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that tithing is not both biblical, impactful, and important to our walk with Christ. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is it's not about the amount of money. It's about why you're choosing to be generous. That's what God's after. That's what God's after. The generosity that this church gives, and the church in the greater scheme of things gives, the generosity that we give is it's what allows HCC and other churches opportunities to pour into local, regional, national, and like Jake talked about last week in Venezuela, international communities that need our help. It is important. It is absolutely, absolutely important. It is absolutely biblical. But it is not about the amount of money. It's about the motivation that makes you want to do it. Some people don't have the means to give these exorbitant amount of monies, but they have time, maybe. Or they just have like a little bit of finance, or they have a little bit of time, or they have a little bit of skill, and it's the motivation in your heart that God's after. All right, verse 3 that we talked about. Then Peter said, Ananias, how is it that Satan has so filled your heart that you have lied to the Holy Spirit and have kept for yourself some of the money you received for the land? Didn't it belong to you before it was sold and after it sold? Wasn't the money at your disposal? Peter didn't say, you should have given all the money. He said the opposite. He said, you had the decision. It was on you. You could decide how much you wanted to give. And it wasn't the fact that you didn't give all of it. It was that you gave and then you lied about it. You said that it was all of it. So clearly your motivation was not like out of devotion to God. It was out of some kind of maybe you wanted to one-up Barnabas. Maybe they wanted to look super cool and fancy in front of the church. I don't know. But what I do know is that they had the option, and God was okay with the option. They just chose to be deceptive about it. Verse 7, about 3 hours later, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Peter asked her, tell me, is this the price you and Ananias got for the land? Yes, she said, that is the price. Peter didn't say, but you should have given more, or you should have tried harder. He said, was this the price? Just an honest question, okay? And I think they missed the mark. The problem was not the amount of money, it was the fact that the motivation of Ananias and Sapphira wasn't pure. It wasn't born out of obedience to God or a generous heart towards others. Like I said, I think it was born out of selfish ambition, dishonesty, and deception, probably most importantly. God wants our generosity to be motivated by the impact it has on others, not the impact it has on our salvation. God also wants us to recognize that what's ours is His, and we still have the free will to choose, because that's where the buy-in comes from. And then lastly on this piece, God doesn't measure generosity by dollars. He measures it by devotion. At the end of the day, I think Ananias and Sapphira believed that they could fool everyone with a very public, out-facing, and generous gift, but they weren't being truthful. They had selfish motivation. And God wasn't choosing to use this example as a way to evaluate the size of the offering. He was examining the motives behind it. Because while others on the outside might look at what we give and be like, that's really impressive, that's not what God does. God doesn't look at what we give. God looks at why we give. All right, let's get to point 3. We'll keep things moving. Anybody out there ever been tempted to manufacture an image to impress someone? I'm the only one? Okay, think maybe like Instagram versus reality. I think that'd be like the in vogue term, right? Okay, so I'm the only one. That's fine, but I'll be vulnerable. So I have more than once. And I think I actually did it earlier this week when I was prepping for this talk. So that bio I gave you at the beginning, after I drafted it, I felt like it was a little bit kind of like vanilla, like blah, like, I don't know. Like, that's not very impressive. So I was like, well, I got to spice this thing up. I got to come up with some story. I got to spice this thing up for dramatic effect to make it look really impressive because, after all, like, I know it's July 5th. The crowd's a little light, but, like, somebody decided to let me come up here. Might be one and done, but somebody decided to come up here, and I should probably spice this thing up and make it like look more impressive than it actually is. I just felt like it kind of, lacked a punchline, and I didn't think it was going to leave you with like, oh, that makes sense, and that's why this person or this guy is equipped to speak. Didn't have it, so I was like, what do I spice it up? And then, God works in really awesome and mysterious ways. And then I had this thought came into my mind. It wasn't me that had the thought clearly, because I'm not smart enough to come up with this. But I thought about this super influential 21st century frugal French philosopher. Some of you guys might know who he is. But he told me once, he said, God does not choose the equipped, he equips the chosen. And while I don't know from a big picture that I really feel like equipped or chosen in that sense, Jake and Karen did choose me, so I guess that's me. But I thought about that, and I was like, I don't need to spice it up. I don't need to make it more than it is. But I think spicing up their image was exactly what Ananias and Sapphira were doing too. They're trying to fabricate some kind of outward appearance that would make them look like more holy and more devoted to God. They're manufacturing an image in front of their peers, in front of Peter, and most importantly, they were trying to manufacture an image in front of God, which will never work. It just doesn't work that way. He is all-knowing, but they tried to do it anyway. They knew exactly what they're doing, and so did God. 1 Samuel, just a real quick verse here, 1 Samuel 16:7. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. He knows. He knows. Don't even try. It doesn't matter. Just be you. Just be you. Like I said, I've been working for the fire department for 21 years. I know that seems like a lot. I'm barely old. You probably think like he's barely old enough to drive. I appreciate that. But it has been 21 years. I got hired at 4. No, I didn't. But in my current role at the fire department, I send and receive a lot of emails. A lot. And at the end of the emails, mine included, there's a signature line, right? It has my name, it has my title, it has my contact information, and it has the logo of the fire department, right? I shouldn't say right. You guys, if you haven't got an email from me, you wouldn't know right. But that's what it has at the end. But for some people that I get emails from, the signature line on their email looks like this huge long dissertation of like everything that they've accomplished since their 3rd grade spelling bee victory at their elementary school. Now, if anybody won a 3rd grade spelling bee, preach it on the mountaintops. That's totally cool. I'm good if you put it in your email signature. I'm just making a word picture here. But they have this long dissertation of every accomplishment. Sometimes it's like 3 times the length of the body of the email, but it's like this really, really long thing. And so I read it. Like I said, I read a lot of emails. And another thing you should also know about the fire department is that there's some friendly ribbing that happens on a regular basis, right? A really regular basis. And I could sit up here for a long time and talk about stories about the ribbing that happens, which I won't do, and bore you and make you stay here longer than you want to on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. But I had another coworker. His name's Jeff. I'm leaving the first coworker out of it. So we had this one coworker. I skipped that part. We had this one coworker who will remain nameless, but he had a really, really long email signature, and it just kept getting longer. I feel like every 6 months, it was like one more thing kept getting on the email signature. And most of it, all of it was true. Most of it was about the fire department, but it was just like really long, and you're like, okay, all right. Like, we get it. And then I had a friend named Jeff who, again, here's where the ribbing comes in, that he was like, well, I'm going to try and like throw some jabs and see if he kind of picks up on it. So Jeff started adding to his email signature. And he started adding, and the longer it got, the more ridiculous it got, right? It started with firefighter, EMT, yes. What station he was assigned to, yes. But then it got pretty wild, right? To the point where you're like, this other person has to know what Jeff's trying to do. It said like, best friend 10 years running. Cleanest roommate. I was his roommate. That's a lie. There is no way that he's the cleanest roommate. And I'm not. This is legitimate. I'm not even joking. Super Bowl pigeon trainer. Like the homing pigeons at the Super Bowl. #1 dog dad. 4-time champion of the Puyallup Fair pie eating contest. Quick aside. I did win a pie eating contest yesterday. Thank you. I think I am gluten-free now. And I might be on the fast track to diabetes. But I did win on behalf of the fire department because we can't let the fire department lose to the police department. So I did do that. Anyway, all right. Back here. Four-time champion at Puyallup for fighting contest. And this is the one that took the cake. Stunt double for Snowflake the dolphin in Ace Ventura. And I'm like, Jeff, he's like, I know. He's got to figure it out. Like, he's got to shorten this email signature. And the list just kept going and going and went on for months. And eventually, coworker number one, I think, kind of picked up on it and shortened his email signature. Now, do I know for sure that what coworker number one was trying to do was try to manufacture an image, especially an image in front of God? No, I don't. I don't know the actual specific motivation because I don't have all of the information, because everything he put on there was true. But he sent a lot of emails, too, to a lot of people that he didn't know, right? He doesn't have a relationship with, that wouldn't know his motivation, right? And people that didn't have all the necessary facts, and it could look like he's kind of trying to manufacture an image, right? Like making himself look more important than not more important, just more impactful, potentially, than he actually is. But do you know who does have all the facts about you? Yeah, God's got all the facts. So you're not just manufacturing an image to people. It's about what's in your heart, right? We talked about that in the motivation versus the money, right? It's what's in your heart. God wants you to come as you are, from where you sit, with all your good and all your bad. He wants the real, unfiltered version of you. Because that's real life. That's real life. Why did this come up in Acts chapter 5? Again, because this was the foundational beginning of the new church. Because God needed in Acts to establish the foundation, the pillars, what was important. He needed them to recognize 2,000 years ago that our community is full of people that have good days, they have bad days, they have needs, wants, desires, they have struggles, they have triumphs, and he wants all of it. And he wants all of it to be out there because that's real life. He doesn't want one side of us. He doesn't want just the good and just the bad, just the in-between. He just wants all of it. And I think that for a couple reasons, he wants all of it because that's the people that he is trying to attract to the church, the real version of the world. And he doesn't want us to have to try that hard. Don't worry about it. He just wants you. He wants people that are seeking to know that you can come in any shape or form. And you are not powerful enough. You're not powerful enough to make him love you any less. It doesn't work that way. All right. Let's land the plane. Those are the three things that I wanted to talk about. So we're going to bring the band back up, and as they come up, like I said, I want to land the plane. I'm sure there was some turbulence along the way if I'm continuing the metaphor, but thanks for bearing with me. But I want to leave you with a few thoughts. First off, today is not actually about Ananias and Sapphira. It's about me and you. It's about stepping out of our comfort zone, living radically generous lives, and being real and just being honest. At some point, every one of us has cared too much about appearances, has wrestled with mixed emotions, and we've probably compromised our integrity in some way, even if it's small. Now, well, I don't think we should be proud of it. We should also be vulnerable enough to own it and acknowledge it and do that in front of other people. The gospel proves time and time again that Jesus already knows the real version of you. He isn't asking you to impress him. He's inviting you to come honestly before him with all of it. Because of the cross, your failures are forgiven, every single one of them. And because of the Holy Spirit, your heart can be transformed again and again. So don't leave here trying to manufacture an image. Leave here surrendering your authentic heart. Don't leave here trying to earn God's approval with your money. Leave here motivated by the gratitude for everything that Christ has already accomplished for you, and be confident in the motivation of your generous heart to have impact on others. And possibly most importantly, don't sacrifice your integrity in hopes the deception will pay off, because it won't. In the long run, it won't. Walk in freedom that comes from living honestly before God. Because the one who knows you completely is also the one who loves you completely. Let's continue in worship.